Hello everyone, it's your Sally Coach, and today we'll be going over the Xenocrypt cipher. If the thought of decoding a foreign language sounds intimidating, don't worry, this video is built specifically for you even if you have zero background in Spanish. We will first start off with a crash course on the specific Spanish grammar and vocabulary you need for the cipher, and then we'll walk through a practice problem step by step. So with that said, let's dive in. Firstly, let's go over the biggest difference between a normal aristocrat and a Xenocrypt, other than the fact that it is in Spanish. In a Xenocrypt, you're going to see a new letter added, called the ñ. This is what it looks like. Right there. This is going to look like an N with the tilde on top, but in Spanish, it's a completely different letter. If that doesn't make sense right now, don't worry. It'll click once we actually start moving through the lesson and solving the cipher. Alright, so now that we've covered the extra letter, let's look at some of the single letter words in Spanish. In English, A and I are the only two letters that can be by themselves. However, in Spanish, there are actually 5 different single letter words. That might sound like a pain right now, but if you know how to use them, it can be used as a really fast shortcut to solve the cipher faster than anyone else. Let's start with the easy ones. First, you have the letter A. This is basically a preposition, usually meaning to. This is also used as a possessive nature, possibly relating to a common subject, such as you, me, they, man, woman, and so on. After that, we have the letter Y, which is pronounced as E. This is how you say and in Spanish, unless the next word starts with an I. So this is whenever you use the letter E, sounding like A. Now, this is going to be the same exact meaning as E, having and, except now this is only going to be used when the word after it starts with the letter I. For example, whenever we say you are strong and intelligent in Spanish, we wouldn't say macho y inteligente, we would say macho e inteligente. This is used so that the same sound in the middle, like using the conjunction, isn't the same as the word after it. Now we can see the same thing with the next two letters, the next two single letters, O and U. These are both used for the conjunction or, however, we use U only whenever the next word starts with an O. This is for the exact same reason between Y and E, because the next word starts with the letter O. So instead of saying divertido o optimista, having that O sound 2 times in a row, we would instead use divertido u optimista. So once again, both of these letters are used for or. Now let's look at some of the highest frequency letters within Spanish. So these are the letters that you want to look for whenever you're looking at your highest frequencies. So this is going to be E, A, O, S, N, and R. All of these letters are going to be used as your highest frequency, and you can also see these on your frequency table when you're given your reference sheet. Now let's look at some common words. If you're like cramming right before an invitational, right before a regional, even state, these are really important words for you to look at before you go to that competition, because these are going to be the most common ones you might see on your Xenocrypt. This is because it includes a lot of different pronouns or nouns in general, having a you, man, woman, so on. And then it also includes some of the most common adjectives, such as really, well, that's not an adjective, but I guess working hard, that's one thing, or funny or kind. All of these are really, really important to look at whenever you're solving the cipher. And then the most important would be the timings. If you are able to easily spot out like an afternoon setting, if it talks about eggs and bacon, for example, then you know that you're going to be looking for something like this, talking about your morning. Same thing for this last word right here, que. Now, this is the word that I always spot for whenever I start, in case I ever start with like an upside down question mark, knowing that I am talking about some sort of question. This is the word that I always look for because it gives me a really low frequency letter, and then a somewhat low frequency letter U, and then the really high frequency letter E. So this is all really important to take in whenever you first start solving a Xenocrypt. So moving along from the single letter and common words, let's look at some specific gender-specific areas. So in Spanish, there are certain words that are masculine or feminine, which helps the reader understand the context and keeps the sentence structured. Let's first start with some masculine terminology. If you look at the masculine side section on the side, I wrote down L.O. This means that if you have a masculine noun, you will almost always use L in front of it as the masculine version of the. Now, you don't always need to use L, it depends on the number of subject, but if the noun is plural, L becomes los to match. So whenever we have L, like right here, it's always going to end with O, the next word, because this tells us that our subject or what we're talking about is going to be masculine. Now, same thing with the agreement. If we are going to do los, talking about plural articles, then we're going to be using it os instead, just to make sure that they understand, they as in the reader understands that we're talking about a plural problem the entire time. Now you're probably thinking, like, how am I supposed to know if a word is masculine or not? A solid way to tell is by cross-checking with this chart right here. All of these endings, all of these endings to nouns are almost always going to be masculine. So if you are, once again, cramming for an invitational, these are going to be common masculine words that you might see all over here. And then this is what you want to look for whenever you're looking for a masculine letter or masculine words around it. So now let's go on to the feminine side of things. So just like the masculine words using L for masculine words, same thing for feminine. We're going to be using the word la. So whenever we have the word la, meaning the, then our feminine noun is going to end with an A instead, just to make sure that it ends with A, and same thing with the last one being O and O. Well, L and O. Now, once again, for the agreement, whenever we are talking about something plural, then we're going to be using the word las. This is so that they know that what we're talking about is plural, and we can keep on moving on with that. So it's going to be las and then mesas, for example, having that plural noun afterwards. Now let's look at some of the common nouns ending, common noun ending to tell us if it's going to be a feminine or masculine word. For feminine, it's going to be all of these. This is really important to know. Once again, if you're cramming for an invitational, this is going to be really, really helpful for you to know. And then the same thing over here. These are going to be all of your really common feminine words, being like house, mouth, idea, all of these. Idea is the same in Spanish and English, but these are just some of the most important ones that you should know. And then lastly, both sides have a couple of exceptions. For example, the exception on the masculine side being problema. This does end with an A, but it technically is a masculine word. And same thing with mappa, meaning a map, but this once again is masculine. We can see the same thing on the feminine side, having mano and photo, meaning hand and a photo, but these are actually going to be feminine words, even though it does end with O. So it might be pretty annoying having to go through a lot, not knowing if it's going to be masculine or feminine, but if you start to learn more vocabulary, start to understand and do more Xenocrypts, this is going to be a really helpful way for you to solve a lot more ciphers. So moving along from gender, let's now look at verb conjugation. Now this is an extremely important topic within Xenocrypts. So if we look at this table on the left that I made, it has everything that you need. So it's going to take from 3 different verb groups. So this is going to be verbs that end with AR, ER, and IR. And then it also gives us the person speaking about this. It's like me, you, and so on. This is all going to be extremely important for you to know. So for a quick heads up before we start going on, verb endings change a lot when you change tenses, such as past or future. Most Science Olympiad quotes are always going to be in the present tense and usually in the first or third person. So especially at lower levels, don't stress about learning every single tense. Just master the present tense first before you move on. So it may seem important in a real life scenario about using verb conjugation, but why does this matter for a cipher? So let's look at this example on the right here. So I can see that I first said eos. Now this tells me, if I look at the chart, that if I have the word eos, then right here, I would have this, and then I would also be connecting with this certain verb. Now, since I know that this letter is going to be A through something else that I may have solved, then I know this next letter must be N. This is a really helpful way to go about verb conjugations because it gives you a really easy letter as you go on. Like if I just know one letter like right before it, then it tells me the next one has to be an N because of my verb conjugation between eos, eas, and then -ar. So this is very, very easy. It's a very easy way to recognize extra letters and quickly finish ciphers. Now, lastly, there is one more thing about verb conjugation, and that's going to be dropping pronouns. In Spanish, people often leave out words like yo, which means I, or nosotros, which means us, because the verb ending already tells you who is speaking. For example, right here, I can see that whenever I have yo, which means I, every single one of these verb endings end with an O. So if you just say like bailo instead of yo bailo, you already know that you're talking about yourself. However, if you say like bailas or bailes, it doesn't help as much because in this case, there is the tú. Like, is it like, are you talking about yourself? Are you talking about someone else? Using this like verb conjugation in the end, it doesn't support your original claim or original pronoun that you're using to support everything else. So overall, instead of saying yo bailo, a quote might just say bailo since yo already ends in that -o. So you already know who is dancing without needing that extra word. So this is going to cover pretty much everything about verb conjugation other than past or future tenses. A couple last things to go off of is looking at some of these excess, terminology within verb conjugation, verbs in general. And that's going to be the tilde. Now this is going to be really important as you go on within higher levels of Spanish, but within the Xenocrypt itself, it doesn't really appear in a cipher at all. Like, you need to know it's there, but they don't really make you understand it fully. The only tilde that you're going to be having to know and having to be part of your Xenocrypt is going to be this one right here, the squiggle, as people most usually say, but this is the only one that you're going to be seeing within your Xenocrypts. Other than that, you just need to know how verb conjugation works, and all you need to know that it just changes the ending of all verbs in Spanish based on the person speaking it, and then it's very different from English because we usually say like I run, he runs, they run, using that same run everywhere, but the second you change the person speaking, the verb ending changes a lot, as you can see from the table. So covering verb conjugation, let's now go to the last section about a little bit important things that you need to know for the rest. So the first thing is going to be to be or not to be. So pretty much in Spanish, there are two different ways to say to be. This is going to be ser and estar. Ser is for things that are permanent or essential. This is going to be something like your identity, your job, where you're from, your profession, and so on. So you're going to say something like soy profesor, which means I am a teacher. However, estar is for temporary states, like how you're feeling or where you are right now. For example, you may say estoy cansado, which means I am tired. So looking at how these things can be easily interchangeable could be really bad for your Xenocrypt. You need to understand that both of these words are extremely specific to what is going on in the context, who you're talking about, what you're talking about, and so on. Let's now look at the next point, which is your adjective placement. So in English, we usually put the adjective right before the noun, such as the red car. However, in Spanish, it is almost always flipped. The adjective comes right after the noun. So you're literally saying the car red. So keep this in mind whenever you're trying to figure out what a word means based on the ones around it. Also right here, I said coche, but this could also mean carro based on where you're from. This also makes most Xenocrypts complex because based on where you live in the world, there is very different dialects in how you say a lot of words. For example, I know most of the world, they do not say vosotros, and it's only really present in Spain. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you're going through a cipher or whenever you're just speaking Spanish daily. Now, the last thing that I want to go over is punctuation. This is a dead giveaway within a cipher because in Spanish, if a sentence usually starts with an exclamation or it's in like a really happy tone, it's going to start with an upside down exclamation mark. This also goes for questions whenever you're starting with a question or whenever you're talking about someone, I guess, well, like a question about someone, it's always going to start with an upside down question mark. So before every single sentence, if you need to talk an exclamation or a question, then it's always going to start with that symbol except upside down. So if you see one of these before the sentence in your ciphertext, you already know what kind of sentence you're dealing with before you even decode a single letter. Alright, so now that we covered everything to get you started with the Spanish language, let's now jump into the fun part and actually solve the cipher. Alright, so let's get started on solving the actual Xenocrypt. So this one pretty much says that decrypt the following ciphertext in Spanish that has been encoded using the Xenocrypt cipher with a K1 alphabet and an English keyword. This is very, very important because in some cases they use a Spanish keyword, sometimes they use an English keyword, so it's always important to look at your alphabet and also your keyword used. They usually give you an English keyword, but in some cases they do give you Spanish, especially if you're doing a Division C test. So let's first look at a couple of clues that can help us with the cipher. First of all, we know it's in K1, so that's important to look at. And then we can also see our frequency. We have a lot of letters that are in like medium to high frequency, like like H with 7, I with 6, and then we have M and so on. And then we also have T. T is extremely high frequency. So this tells me that it must be a letter, something like A, something like, what are my other frequent ones? Like right here we saw E, A, O. These are all very, very common. So it tells me that it must be one of those. So that's something good to keep in mind. That my T must be A, E, O, some sort of vowel like that. So if I look into my text and see where I have all my T's, I can start looking and see that I have it as a single letter, so that also helps me out. And then I can also see that I have a single letter right here. Now J, it has a pretty medium frequency with 6, but if I look at the placement of my J, I can see that it's in the end of all 3 of these. So it tells me that it must be A or O. Now I came to this conclusion because first of all, J must be a single letter word. So this tells me it must be like Y, A, E, O, and the last one being U. So that's what I already know from here. After that, I can tell that one of these must be A or O. I got that because T has a really high frequency, so that tells me T must be most likely A or O. And then also looking at this, it would give me that kind of conjunction of I would have this and that or that. So let's say I could say like for breakfast I am having yogurt and getting that A in from T to A, and raspberries or blueberries, giving us that O. So this is one way that we can look at it to give us that like necessary of saying that J must be an A or an O. So that already gives us a little bit of a hint as to what we're looking for. So that's something that I can just keep in mind as I'm solving out the cipher. So other than that, other than looking at T being A or O, let's look at our words itself. So first thing that I usually look for is looking at my 3-letter words. I want to look at something that looks like G. Now this is because this is very easy to spot out, having a low frequency letter at the very start, and then having a high at the very end, and then a somewhat middle in the middle as well. But most importantly, I'm looking for a 3-letter word with a very low frequency letter at the beginning. So as I look through the text, I want to look for something that can give me that conjunction, I guess, that combination of words. So let's first look at W. W has a frequency of 3, it could work. T is really high frequency, not really. And then M has a frequency of 8, so this cannot be gay. And now I would just look through this and keep this in my mind as I go through. Like G and P, G being 2, that works, N being 7, that works, and then P being 2 again, that doesn't work. And if I go to KJS next, I can see that K has a pretty medium frequency, J has an okay frequency, but we know J must be an O or an A, so that doesn't make sense either. So then I would look at L and V. L has a frequency of 2, which makes sense, N has a frequency of 7, which makes sense, and then V has a pretty medium frequency as well, which makes sense. So this tells me that this may be gay, and I can keep this in my mind as I solve throughout the cipher. So I'm going to write down that this is gay, and just know it could or could not change in the future, but let's look at the other places that we see this kind of formation, where all my V's come together, where all my N's come together, and so on. So wherever I have these letters, I'm going to fill it in. So that's going to be a U, this is going to be an E, U, E, U, and then it's also going to be U, and I believe that is all. Next thing to look at here is let's look at this section right here. I can see that I have the same letters repeating 2 times in a row. So this could be really easy ways to get letters, and then I also have a conjunction of those, like, I guess, a switch around of those letters, like an anagram, in here as well. So it's pretty important to look at this ending right here, just to let me know that I have a lot of repeating letters, and they're all kind of around the place. We can't really pinpoint exactly what this might be. So for now, other than that, we got a couple of words in, we have a little bit of idea what our single letter words are. Now let's go a little bit complex, and let's look at the endings of some of my words, and let's also look at some repetition between letters and words. For example, what I mean by repetition was just like this, once again, having the repetition of THZ, THZ, and then HTZ. And then I also want to see about like some sort of repetition, looking at this TST, TBNT, starting and ending with a certain letter being T, very, very common. And then something else that I want to look at is some of my two-letter words. Like right here, this is supposed to E. So I have VW, I have PT, I have RN, and this tells me that I may have a lot of really easy words that could be two-letter words. For example, like right here, there are many two-letter words that start with an E. This is EL, EN, ES. There are so many to look at. So it lets us know that whenever we have this W, we want to look at certain areas. Like, is it going to be W to L, W to N, or what? So let's look at where my W is placed to help us figure out which letter this could be. So as I go out throughout the text, I can see that W has a frequency of 3, so it's not going to be found in many other places. So W is found right here, and right here, I guess, and then there's one more spot, right there. So I'm just trying to spot as many areas as I can that can help us out in the future. Now this is because, as I'm looking at these two-letter words, now this takes me to the next step, looking at word endings. When I look at word endings, I want to see right here. This is TM, right? I can see TM spotted in so many other places. I can see it spotted here, I can see it spotted here, I can see it spotted here. These word endings tell me who is speaking, and not only that, but it also tells us the subject of who is speaking. Let's go back to our verbs area. So if I go back and look at my verbs table, I can see that an ending of AS or OS, well, this is just AS and ES, is going to be with TU, talking about you. So I'm using this to let me know about the word ending of TM right here. Now, originally, we thought T was going to be A or it was going to be O. We weren't sure which one it is. But now, after looking at how verbs can end or how nouns can end to match up with verb conjugation, we can see that we're talking about someone with, that's not us, we're talking about you. And then we're also talking about nouns that end in with AS or ES. So looking once again, I already used up my E. I already saw that I can't use E anymore. So now, instead of using E, I'm going to end with AS for most of my nouns. So this tells me that my TM is going to be an AS. So wherever I see TM, I'm going to put in an AS. Now I can also verify this by looking at my two-letter words. Since we know we're talking about someone else, we want the word TU to be found somewhere. And we can see this being true right here, with RN being TU. This is just trying to complete the picture. We have so many different things that we're looking at, and as long as we understand and we can implement all of the different grammar that we just learned, such as verb conjugation, common words, common letters, using frequency, using these endings, using the single letters, there's so much for you to look at, which makes the Xenocrypt so complicated. But if we're able to use all of this together, it makes it very easy to solve the rest of the cipher. So now I'm going to pause and I'm going to fill in all of the other areas in which I have T to A and M to S. Alright, so now that I filled up most of my spots, all that's left to really do now is to fill in the rest of my words. So as I go on, I can really just start with my first letter right here, having W. So now that we know that we're talking about someone else, and we're using this AS as an ending, let's go back to this second area of feminine and masculine. So if I go back to this region, I can see that I need to have something called agreement. So whenever I have my word ending with AS, I want the word before it to be las, giving like the. So whatever word this is in my second spot, I'm not sure what it is, but whatever that is, since it's ending in AS, that means my first word must start with an L to get LAS. Now this also makes complete sense, having EL right here. Even though I have an A in the second word, that doesn't mean that I just cannot use L. That means, oh, it has to be feminine, it has to be la. I don't really know any of that. Now, I don't know any of this because there's so many exceptions that I can't cover all of them whenever I'm looking into what is masculine, what is feminine within Spanish. So it's important that we just stick to what our cipher is giving us right here and then use grammar wherever else we can. So now that we know that W is L, I can fill it in wherever I see fit. So WL there, there, and there. Next up, we can look at some other areas, such as this right here. G has a pretty medium frequency, well, pretty low actually, of 2. So where else does G seem fit? G is found right here. So I can use a lot of different letters to fit this in, but using a common word like mas could be very interesting. Now, since I can have a G to M, I'm going to do this in a different color just in case it's wrong. G to M, I can have M-U-Y, and then I would have P to Y, giving us ya. Now this means already in Spanish, Y-A. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments about Y-A meaning already, but knowing about the Spanish that I know, that means ya. Y-A means already. So having G to M gives us a pretty good idea of other letters in the text and kind of works throughout all of the other regions in which these letters are present within the text. So I'm okay with putting that as Y, P to Y, and a G to M. After this, we can go back to the very beginning when we were confused about T and J, and now we can confidently say that J is going to be an O right here, and I can fill that in everywhere else, J to O. So now I'm going to go out and fill in all the other areas in which I have J to O. So J to O is right here, and a couple other spots, J to O, J to O, and where else? That should be all. I don't see any other areas where I have J to O. So now, again, it's just filling in what could or could not be true. Next up, I can take this word right here, giving me water. This is the only letter that really fits here. That's the only one that makes sense. This means water, so it's talking about the water. So now I'm going to go and look at where else I have B, and I'm going to fill that in with a G. So it's going to be right here. Now this word, it's kind of hard to get, so I'm not going to go straight into how to find that one yet. We can look at other spots. Right here, we still want to find what K and S are, because both of those, K has a pretty low frequency, and S has a pretty high frequency. So let's see where my S is standing to figure out if we can figure that out or not. To see, does it make sense, does it not make sense? What can we do with it? So S is going to be seen in a variety of areas. We can see it at the start of a couple of words, after the G, before the A. We can see it at the end of this word as well, between the two A's. There's a lot of different places that it is seen, but none of them really help us all that much. We can see right here that we have KTST, possibly giving S as maybe R, and K as P. And the only reason that I can see this as true is because I can see the same letter forming right here for KJS. So getting para over here can help us with this word to get POR right here. So now I'm going to have K to P and then S to R, which makes complete sense. So now wherever else I have an S, I'm going to put as an R and then keep on moving throughout the cipher. So now I have S to R in many different places. And then the next thing to look at now is going to be this word right here. We pretty much finished it. So now I can confidently say that this is going to be grande, sort of as grandes. And then this also gives us two very frequent letters in our text, giving us Z to D and then H to N. So H to N, Z to D. And wherever I see that, I'm going to fill that in. h to n, z to d. Where else is it? Z to d and h to n. And that should be all. Alright, so next up is just looking at the rest of the words. Can we see anything forming? Right here, we can't really tell anything yet looking at x and y. X, it's pretty low frequency with only 1. Y is medium with about 3. So we can look at where else we have y missing and try to figure that out. We have a y missing, right? We have y missing here, y missing here, and y missing here. Still doesn't help us too much. We can't really find any place in which that can work out. U is also pretty low frequency. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I see anywhere else that has U. Yeah, frequency of 1. We can't really do anything with that either. There's D. D also has medium frequency with 4. So looking where else D is seen. D. Yeah, again, can't really do much with that. Another one forming right here. So now the only thing left to do is to fill in the letters into our table and figure out where the rest of the letters are seen. Now, this is about how far I can get until I come to a point where I'm somewhat stuck and have to really use my Spanish understanding, Spanish vocabulary to figure out the rest. But this is also why they give you a K1 alphabet and English keyword to just help you out and finish the rest of the cipher if you don't have that much background in Spanish. But if I go through it and really look close, I can see that I can get a really common letter right here to get the word rapido. So this is going to be D to I. D to I is also seen a couple other areas. And then D to I right here. This starts with U. So now all I'm really missing in this case is going to be an R, some sort of T's. So I can try putting R to T, which makes sense, giving me some sort of utility. I believe that's what this means. And then this could also give me distance. Yeah, distance from the water, which makes sense. So now I would have distance from the water, giving me Y to C, which makes sense once again. And now I can continue filling in the letters that I don't know. So right here, I have that. So all I'm really missing now is going to be an X. And I can tell that X is going to be B based on my K1 alphabet, giving me Z to D and then Y to C. So in that case, if Z is going to be D, Y is going to be C, and then X must be B, which makes sense. And now if I keep on going, I can see that I'm missing Q and T. I can look at my, Q is very low. T is going to be A. I just forgot to fill that in. What else am I missing? I'm missing a U. So I'm missing one U right here. I'm missing a Q. And then what else am I missing? I believe that's it. So if I were to fill in these last two letters, I would get points. And even if I were not to fill in these last two letters, I would not get any points. I mean, I would get points because of the 2 mistake rule, so that's completely fine. But if we were to look a little bit closer and just continue on using our K1 alphabet, we can see that U is going to be what letter? This would be A. V is what? V is going to be E. W is L. X was going to be B, C, D. That gives me that. S is going to be R. R is going to be T. Q would go out to be Z, giving our keyword to be actually in this area, and giving us U to V as well to give us travel as our keyword. So this would end up as being U to V, and then we would also get Q to Z. So all of this would mean, in English, boats are very useful for crossing long distances through water since they go faster than you can swim or walk. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the Xenocrypt cipher video. And if you have any questions or if you want to book a specific meeting with me for a specific event, you can use the link down below. And if you did like this video, please make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, as it would help me very, very much. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.